Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you had a good break. We're just going to dive right into it. So we're really pleased to have Tim Cappalli from Microsoft and Christiaan Brand from Google here with us to present a Passkeys 101. So this is the deeper dive. So please do submit your questions. I believe we'll have some time to ask them some questions at the end, and I'll see you here in a little bit. Tim, take it away.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah, like Megan said, my name is Tim Cappalli. I'm a standards architect at Microsoft, and Christiaan is going to join me in a minute with a demo, and he's a product manager in security and identity over at Google, and we've been working on Passkeys since their inception, so we're excited to be here to talk about them with you. So I want to, before we jump into what is a Passkey, right, I think Andrew covered it a bit, but we'll go deeper. I do want to talk about the road to Passkeys, how we got here, because it's super important to the overall vision and why we ended up with this Passkey concept. So around 2014, there was FIDO U2F and FIDO UAF. U2F, if you're not familiar, was more of the second factor, right? Google was probably the largest deployment at the time of using a security key to protect your Google account. And then FIDO UAF, which was more of a mobile device-centric credential, heavily used with like mobile service providers, right? It was a great way to have a strong identity bound to a phone issued by a carrier, let's say. So that was all the way back in 2014, which is crazy, coming up on almost 10 years. Fast forward to 2017 is when FIDO2 came around and CTAP2, which we'll talk about the different protocol names in a second. That was really the one of the core, where most of the technology is to actually interact with a FIDO authenticator. And then between 2017 and 2019, WebAuthn came onto the scene. WebAuthn is how you actually interact with these protocols via the browser. That's like the most forward. It's where most of developers actually spend most of their time. From 2019, we started to see widespread FIDO2 platform support. So that's both FIDO2 and WebAuthn, which obviously the clients, the browsers, the operating systems need to have support for this for it to actually be usable by the masses. If you fast forward all the way to 2022, this is where Passkeys came on the scene last May when we jointly announced with Apple, Google, and the FIDO Alliance this whole Passkey thing, right? So it's been a journey, like I said, almost 10 years since kind of this work stream started, and we think the last 2 to 3 years, we really think this is really moving towards the last step in really moving people beyond passwords. So to talk a little bit about the standards, right? The two standards that are at play, we kind of generally call them the FIDO2 WebAuthn stack. Some people just refer to it generically as FIDO2. As I mentioned earlier, WebAuthn or Web Authentication, that is a W3C specification that actually deals with the JavaScript in the browser that a developer uses to actually request that a credential be used to sign in and create the credential in the first place. And so that is really where 99.8% of technical developers interact with, right? It is what you as a relying party or you as an app developer in different ways ultimately interact with to do secure phishing resistant sign-in. The other half, which is a very, very small chunk of folks who actually have to deal with this protocol, is the client to authenticator protocol. It's super complicated. It's super complex. It does a lot, but luckily most people never have to worry about it. It's the people who make your security keys and the people who make your operating systems and browsers that have to work with that protocol. But it's super important, right? It's all of the glue that brings all of these different pieces together. And so when we talk about these protocols, like why even use FIDO2 in the first place, right? That's probably the most, where we're here to talk about new technology. Why would we use this stack in the first place? So there's 5 big core reasons why we use FIDO2. One is that there's a one-to-one unique credential per service, and that's guaranteed, right? When a user uses a password manager, the password manager often will generate a unique credential for that site, a unique password, but it's not something that really is enforced anywhere, right? The website doesn't know that you haven't used that password somewhere else. The technology here, just by design, enforces that there is a unique credential per service. So I have a unique credential for login.microsoft.com. I have a unique credential for accounts.google.com, and PayPal and GitHub. They're all separate. They can't be shared and used across those sites, right? So that's a very, very strong property of FIDO2. They are standards-based, right? Obviously, I'm a standards person, right? It's super important. Not a lot of technologies out there fail because there's no interoperability and standards. They are phishing resistant. That's mostly why we're here today to talk about Passkeys, right? Is how do we get people towards this phishing resistant future? They use asymmetric cryptography, but without you having to deploy a PKI, right? Anytime we talk about PKI or cryptography or any of these things, people assume, oh my God, it's the I have to set up a CA with, so nobody wants to do that, right? So please don't, we don't have to worry about that with this, which is very nice. It abstracts away some of the complexities around deploying crypto-based solutions. And the last one, which I think is probably one of the most important points at this point, is because it's standard-based, there's native support across the major operating systems and browsers, which is, really a key to the success of these solutions. As Andrew mentioned, right, I never thought in my career that I would be working so closely with who are ultimately often treated as competitors, but we worked incredibly close to make sure that there was native support across all these different devices to ensure users can sign in and they're not stranded without being able to use these technologies. Let's talk about phishing resistance. As I mentioned, like phishing resistance is the big driver for Passkeys, right? Phishing resistance, the two core pieces that make something phishing resistant, especially Passkeys, are local proximity. And if we look at the two different types of authenticator form factors, right, you have, typically a laptop, desktop, or phone, right? And those have their own security components built in, soldered on, or it's part of the CPU, right? It's a very closed environment there. Or you have something that's called a roaming authenticator, which typically uses USB like a security key. There's a lot of security keys out there that actually also use Bluetooth. And even like some of these, tap card based solutions actually can do NFC on top of other protocols like PIV, right? So those all require local proximity, right? You have to be on top of an NFC reader. Bluetooth LE has a very short range, and USB has a physical connection, right? So proximity is super, super important for phishing resistance. The other piece is origin binding, right? This is fairly unique for FIDO, right? If we use this example, right? I have a FIDO credential for login.captoso.com, a fictional identity provider or relying party. My username is tim@mymail.com. If we were to go to login.captoso.com and try to use that credential, it would work. It's an exact match of the domain and the origin. Now, if we were to go to login.captoso.com.site.xyz, this is a very, very common pattern for attackers, right? They will do super, super long domains, right? They'll keep tacking on subdomains in the hope that the browser truncates the right-hand side and you only see login.captoso.com. Very, very common trend. But because this is origin bound, this credential only works for login.captoso.com. This credential cannot be asserted for that service. Obviously, myaccount.com, completely different domain altogether, different top level and everything, gone, right? Not able to use it. The last one, login.captoso.com. I just said that would work. It won't. Let me change the font, right? Another common trick with attackers is to use fonts that make letters look different, right? So in this case, it's actually an I, not an L, and this would not work for this site. So two very, very strong properties of FIDO authentication, which enable phishing resistance and why we believe this is the future path to replace passwords. Now, the challenges with this technology today, right? We talked about this has kind of been out there for like 10 years in some way, shape, or form. But in those 10 years, right, adoption is certainly not where we want it to be. Passwords are still there. A majority of even enterprise users in many solutions are still using passwords and passwords only, or passwords plus some kind of SMS OTP. So we are still kind of stuck in an environment where we can't deploy at mass scale. And some of those challenges that led to that, right, are the roaming authenticators, these security keys. They have a cost, right? And on the enterprise side, not as big of an issue typically, right? And you issue a laptop and you can issue a security key, but my friends, my parents, my family, they're not going to want to buy these. And you really have to buy two of them, right? What if something happens to this other one? I need a backup, right? So you're looking at $50 to $100 of cost for something that users really don't understand why they even need it. They really are needed to securely bootstrap the platform, right? The pattern that we had up until Passkeys was, okay, you actually, if you had an account with strong auth attached, you would actually use your security key the first time you signed in on a new, let's say, Windows device. And then you would actually be prompted to say, hey, let's set up Windows Hello so you can use that from then on out. That's awesome. You're using Windows Hello, also strong credential, until you get a new device. But you still needed this thing to bootstrap it, right? That's a problem. Like it is not a scalable solution for end users. On the consumer side specifically, they're just not interested in buying them. As I mentioned, people don't even understand what it is, and then asking them you have to buy one to protect yourself. Really, the the only solution that seems to work is giving them away, and that obviously doesn't scale either. The other fun one I like to point out is, I don't know about you, but my keychain that like I carry in my pocket has like one thing left, and it's my my mailbox key, because it's an old school physical key. That's all that's left, right? And I think more people are not going to have even a mailbox key, and to ask them to start carrying this thing on their keychain when everything else on their keychain is moving to some other device they already have is a pretty hard sell for most users. The other one is just more naming and familiarity, right? WebAuthn and security key are not common terms for users, right? They're not familiar. Like WebAuthn is literally the name of an API, right? And we've kind of used that as the default for exposing to users. Security key is, most people just call it a USB dongle and they think it's a flash drive, and super confusing, right? So how do we move past these challenges? The vision to solve some of those concerns, right, is we need something that's as easy to use as a password. It's easy for users to recognize and understand. It leverages users' existing investments. It is durable across device loss, and it works at global scale around the world. So that's where we get into passkeys. So in its most simple form, what is a passkey? Passkeys are replacements for passwords, right? And you'll notice in very small text at the bottom and all the baggage that comes with them, right? Passwords are very rarely deployed by themselves. The patterns that we often see, right, are username or password, and then everyone was told, oh, you're susceptible to phishing attacks with just a password, so let's leverage on an OTP via SMS, right? Or do an OTP via an app, or do an OTP via an email, or do some kind of app push. All of these things have friction, users hate it, right? The other one that's been trending lately is username plus an email magic link, and then you click the link, and you have to ensure you get back to the right browser from your email, and all these different flows, which are just not ideal. The other one, which frustrates me to no end, username, then you do the OTP, then you enter the password, right? There's all these different confusing flows that are super frustrating. Same pattern with the username, then magic link, then password. So, we had all of those options. At the end of the day, the password is phishable, and all of those other things that you're doing are also phishable, right? So you're tagging on another phishable credential with phishable credential 1, and hoping that it makes it less phishable, right? Which is just, again, not a good long-term solution. So if we replace this primary thing called a password with something that is actually phishing resistant called a passkey, the need for all of these other things rapidly goes out the window, right? We can punt those away. We no longer need something to solve for phishing if the first factor is phishing resistant. And what that really means for users is they're happier, right? They don't have to do these convoluted flows. One click that they're used to today, right? They're used to unlocking their phone with a biometric. One biometric tap away or face unlock, and you are into a site on a new device. Lower costs, right? SMS is expensive. Sending emails even is expensive, right? These are some of the highest costs for organizations at global scale. For Microsoft, it's a huge cost. Us sending SMS, that is massive, massive cost at scale. And then users end up with better account security, which benefits the user and benefits the organization as well. So two more specific definitions of passkeys. And obviously we have different audiences, right? So what I call the friends and family edition, right? If I'm explaining this to my mother or explaining it to a non-tech savvy friend, I like to say it's a replacement for passwords that uses your fingerprint, face, or device PIN to sign into apps and websites, right? Super simple. Generally, you don't have to qualify it much more than that. People tend to understand that. Now, when we're talking to like probably everyone on this call and technologists and developers, I call it the technologist edition, right? For folks that are a little closer to FIDO. The more technical definition, right? A phishing resistant password replacement, FIDO2 discoverable credential usable across your devices, right? Bit of a mouthful. We wouldn't use that in common banter, but that's kind of the way we would describe it to a technology focused person. Now, the important thing, Andrew mentioned this, right? We have a password today, and now we have a passkey. We have passwords and passkeys, right? It's a common noun. It is not an Apple passkey. It is not a capital P. It is not a passspace key. It is not a Google passkey. It's not a Microsoft passkey. It's a passkey, lowercase p, just like password, passkey, common noun. We've seen it. It's only been out in the market for about, since last May, and it's already very common term even in most circles. So, it is proven to be valuable that it is kind of a generic term like password. Now, the different components of the passkey experience, which Christian's going to demo in a few minutes, we talked mostly about the credential, right? It's this new kind of credential It is just a FIDO credential with some new properties, right? It can actually be durable across your devices. You don't have to do that constant bootstrapping experience for every single site you access. Super valuable. That's the credential. We talked a lot about that. The other piece is a UX enhancement that we call the autofill UI, right? The idea here is that any existing sign-in flow that you have that has a username field, you can drop Passkey support in and be fairly unintrusive to your users that still are using some of these other traditional flows, right? So this is an example of an existing site in this little screenshot that starts with a identifier first flow. Typically, the user types the username and they hit continue. If the user has a passkey on this device, it's actually going to be rendered right on top and show them that passkey, right? So for users that are enlightened for passkeys already, they can take advantage of it, and it's not disruptive to existing users. And the last one is cross-device authentication. Actually being able to use a passkey that's on my Android phone to sign into something on Windows if I don't have one on that device, right? So cross-ecosystem. And let's dive in a little deeper onto the autofill UI. This is a live example on the right. This is a very familiar experience for users, right? The password autofill experience, whether users are actively know they're using a password manager, many just use the browser-based autofill that's provided. And it's not something they set up, it's just kind of there. So this is a very familiar experience for users. It is dynamic, right? So again, like if you don't have a passkey there, it's not going to promote. There's not much for the user to do there, which is great, right? It's not intrusive for these flows where you're transitioning users over to passkeys slowly. One of the most important details is it's privacy preserving. That is actually rendered by the browser in coordination with the passkey provider under the covers so that the relying party does not, there's nothing to disclose until the user consents by clicking on the passkey and then doing a biometric. And at that point, the traditional WebAuthn flow continues. So there's no privacy changes here. As I mentioned, it's a simple change for relying parties, right? At its very, very high level core, you add a new tag to your username field in the HTML form, and you essentially call a WebAuthn request on page flow. And that's as simple as it is, right? So there's not a traditional change cycle of like, oh my God, we're going to blow up our login page, right? It's actually super, super easy to implement. On the cross-device authentication flow, right? We think about it is kind of the casual name for a new transport in FIDO, which is known as hybrid, not a term we like to use in general conversation. That's not very friendly. But the result is this thing we call cross-device authentication. And it essentially allows your phone to be able to bootstrap another device or ecosystem. But it also allows for more advanced scenarios like in an enterprise when you have a kiosk type scenario or a shared device where you don't want users enrolling local biometrics. It's a great opportunity to actually use the passkey from your phone to sign in, just like you would use a security key in higher security environments. So it's super flexible. It's really a lot of the glue to bring all these solutions together at scale. And at that, Christian's going to actually show you all of this instead of just seeing it on slides, and I will hand it over to him.
All right, thank you so much, Tim. Hi, folks, I'm Christiaan. I work on Passkey-related efforts here at Google. So what I need to be able to do is just quickly share my screen. Hopefully this will go according to plan. Let me see if I can bring this up. And what you should be able to see at this point is both my desktop browser here on Mac and then also my Android phone here on the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a user doing pretty standard thing, visiting a website. In this particular case, it is visiting their favorite banking website called TryBank. And we're going to go through all of the different use cases and the user journeys that Tim just talked about. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to log into my banking website using something we're all very familiar with. I'm going to type my username, I'm going to type my password, and I'm going to hit sign in. Now, in this particular flow, once I go through and I click this button, the website should load. And once the website loads, it should bring me up the option to create something called a brand new passkey and essentially upgrade my experience from passwords to passkeys. So this is all context that the website talks to me about. It says, hey, you can upgrade to a passkey for stronger security. I go ahead and say, yes, I want to do that. And at this point, Android native UI kicks in. It explains a little bit more about passkeys to me. I click continue. It offers to create the passkey. I say, yes, create this passkey. Of course, I touch my fingerprint on the sensor, and now I have a passkey for TriBank. Now, the cool thing about having a passkey is next time I come back to the same website, I'm going to sign out for now. Next time I come back to this website, I don't have to enter my username or my password. I simply click into the account name field, and helpful UI pops up and says, hey, you've got a saved passkey that you can use here. And I say, yep, that's what I want to do. I touch my fingerprint, and instantly I'm signed in back into my account. Now, what's really cool is passkeys don't only work on the web, they also work in apps. So if I open the TriBank app that I have installed on my phone, I click into TriBank, click into the account name field. I should see some pop-up that comes up that says, hey, you have a passkey for TriBank. Do you want to go ahead and use this particular one? I say, yes, that's exactly what I want to do. Touch my fingerprint, and I should be instantly signed into the native application as well. So passkeys work both across web and applications on my mobile phone. Now, the next day, I go to my desktop and I want to log into TriBank over here. I don't have to type usernames and passwords because remember, I just made a passkey on my Android phone. So all I have to do is click into the account name field. There is a new option that appears that says use a passkey on a different device. I click that. I get the option to use my phone, which this particular website knows about, or the particular system knows about, because I've used my phone with this particular browser before to sign into websites. So I pick my Pixel 6 Pro here. I get a pop-up. It asks me which passkey I want to use. I only have one, so I click this particular one. I touch my fingerprint on the sensor, and immediately I should be signed in to this website on the TriBank side. Now, in addition to doing that, I could also create a passkey locally on my MacBook so that next time I come back to this website on my MacBook, I don't have to have my phone again. So I accept the promotion here, the promo, say create me a passkey, go ahead, continue, touch my fingerprint on my MacBook's fingerprint sensor. And at this point in time, I should now have a passkey created on the MacBook as well. So if I sign out of TriBank, and I want to sign back in, all I have to do is click into the account name field again. And this time I see a passkey that's the one that I've just created being displayed here. So I can just click on that passkey, touch my fingerprint on my local sensor on my MacBook, and instantly I should be signed into TriBank. And that is the complete experience from kind of like A to Z, from creating a passkey, using it across web and an app on Android, and then also using a cross-device passkey on my MacBook and creating one over there. So in the end, I end up with two separate passkeys, one for my MacBook and one on my Android device. And both of these are valid to get me back into my TriBank website. Very, very straightforward and super secure. With that, back to Tim.
Awesome. Thank you, Christiaan. Hopefully that highlighted some of the things we showed in the slides in real life, all shipping code, right? This is all here. So let's talk about what the ecosystem looks like right now. This is supported across all major operating systems and browsers. So we have Chrome on Windows, Chrome on Mac, apps on Windows, apps on Mac, Android, iOS, even Ubuntu, right? You can use some of these flows, right? So the time is now. These flows are available. Users can use a passkey in some way, shape, or form across all of these different devices and platforms. And we really recommend that you start diving in and testing these flows for your users. Some resources to actually help you do that. Passkeys.dev is a community-led effort tightly with the FIDO Alliance and W3C and many of the companies that have worked to bring you passkeys. So I highly recommend you check that out. There's some getting started documentation. There's a whole list of things about what's supported on which device and when new things are coming. That site gets regularly updated. And it's also, if you want to contribute to it, it's a GitHub project and open source. So we welcome any contributions. Some other things to follow, right? Passkeys.dev, right? The Passkey developer experience is available. There are accounts on Mastodon and Twitter. If so inclined, we tend to tweet about updates to the content, run some polls about adoption, right? Are you thinking about running these kind of things? So super, would love to have you engaged on these sites as well. And with that, I think we are going to take questions for the last few minutes.
Demo, Christiaan. So we do have lots of questions in the queue. So let's try to go in an order that will make sense. So I think one of the main questions that was repeated like a few times was the QR, so the roaming authenticator QR code flow, like, can you talk a little bit more about like how that flow is going to work?
Yeah. So the nice thing about that flow is, you know, when everyone has implemented the kind of these protocols completely, you actually don't need the QR code every time, right? So you know, we're in a period right now where there are where we're still building all this, right? So you may have to use the QR code, but as you saw with Christian's demo, you know, a device that was already linked because it was previously used with either the platform or the browser, you can actually just click on that device and see the notification, right? So it is not QR-based passkeys, it is not QR-based authentication. The only thing that QR code is actually used for is to set up a relationship between your phone, which is the authenticator, and your operating system or browser as the client, right? So it's, you know, we're trying to avoid like QR-based authentication terms. It's not, it's to build a relationship between two devices.
Awesome, thank you. Wow, there are a lot of questions. This question, I just want to ask it just to be so that we can reiterate the uniqueness of the passkeys, which is, could you use like a passkey that you set up at TriBank with like Target to sign into Target?
I'm happy to take that one. No, I think that's part of the feature set of passkeys is you can't use a passkey that was scoped to a particular domain or to a particular website or an application on a different website. And that's kind of by design, right? That's on purpose, because what we've seen is that users get tricked into creating a password for their bank, and then a website that looks a lot like their bank tricks them into revealing the password over there. With passkeys and FIDO credentials in general, these credentials are really scoped to a single use or a particular purpose, right? They're scoped to bankofamerica.com or Target.com. So because the credential is scoped, even if the user goes and they get tricked into trying to exercise that passkey on a different site, it simply will not work. And that is a feature by design rather than a bug. If you do need to use a passkey legitimately on one website for logging into something else, that is where standard federation would come in, either OpenID Connect or SAML or any one of these standard federation protocols. But from a passkey perspective, it really is a two-party model directly between the website created it and the user.
Thank you, Christian. So the whole sort of premise or the need for passkeys somewhat came from issues around account recovery with device-bound, which we call device-bound passkeys today, or FIDO credentials, bound to certain devices. What is the recovery flow? And I know some of this is, you maybe not to speak to your own implementation, but when you do get a new phone, like what is the recovery or that kind of flow meant to be in a passkeys world?
Tim, do you want to take that one?
You have a phone, you go for it.
Okay, good. All right, I want to be equitable. The mechanism here is, right, at first we had device-bound passkeys. They were fantastic because they had strong security guarantees, as with all FIDO credentials, but the challenge was when the user loses their phone or the particular device, and they need to, move to another device, either they upgrade or they've lost the old device, they're kind of back to square one, right? And that is the approach and the user experience that we see from biometric login today. I have an application on my iPhone, and I, elected to use login with Touch ID or Face ID on my iPhone, and tomorrow I buy a new phone, and I'm right back to square one. When I log into that exact same app on my new phone, I have to log in with a username and a password, and then I can enable Touch ID again. That is a regression, right? Every single time I have to fall back to passwords, there is an opportunity for a fraudster or a malicious party to get into the middle of that login, right? So what we'd like passkeys to be durable. We'd like users to log in with a username and password on day one or day zero, upgrade to passkeys, and I'll never fall back to passwords ever again. Doesn't matter if I get a new phone, doesn't matter if I lose my old phone. When I'm set back, back and set up on my new device, I should just be able to continue right where I left off using my biometric login or whatever I have tied to my passkey. To make that happen, we had to have some mechanism for securely synchronizing and storing your passkeys in the cloud, we have an option in the Google Password Manager on Android. Apple has an option in iCloud Keychain. We also on Android support third-party passkey providers. We'll support that from Android 14 coming out at the end of the year, where if you want to not store your passkeys with the Google Password Manager, but rather want to use any other passkey provider, you'd be free to do so. But essentially, the passkey provider is then responsible for managing the lifecycle of these credentials. With Google, if you lose your old phone and you get a new phone, you just need to be able to log back into your Google account on that device. Once you do that and you pass some additional security bars that we've placed in front of the user, that might be like knowing the old lock screen or some other information that we use for end-to-end encryption. Once you're set back up on your new device, all your passkeys become available again, and you can just continue off or continue where you left off on the old particular device.
Thank you, Christian. I need to apologize to everyone who's asking all kinds of questions. So here's what I will promise. I will get Tim and Christian on a separate call, separate webinar, and we'll just have an open Q&A with them, because unfortunately we don't have time to answer everybody's questions today. I will also provide questions to them from the queue so that they can follow up as needed. But again, thank you for the great interest. And, we are really committed to getting everybody all the passkeys information, as much as we can. So I will definitely put Christian and Tim on the hook to come back and do some more Q&A very, very soon. So thank you, Tim and Christian, for a great presentation. Now we're going to segue into a adopter conversation. So I'm going to let Marcio Mello and Dale Latzig sort of take it from here and introduce themselves, but please do stay on. This is actually a great example of somebody who has really implemented FIDO since the very beginning up until, Passkeys. So this is going to be a really great session. So Dale and Marcio, please take it away.